It's the economy, stupid, has been a shorthand for political truth for decades. But there are suggestions that in some people's eyes, maybe the vote for Brexit, maybe the increasing support for a more leftist Labour Party, suggests that growth in the purest sense might be sacrificed for social change and social transformation. So has the economy become less important in politics? Are we turning to more radical goals that maybe don't necessarily put the economy first and foremost? Well, we're going to find out more about all of those questions in just a few moments. To do that, we have an immensely distinguished panel with us today. On my left is Vince Cable, who is, of course, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. He, of course, served in the coalition cabinet as business secretary and has a very long and distinguished political career, as indeed does Liz Truss. Liz is the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. She was also, I think, the first female Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary. And Richard Burgon is Shadow Justice Secretary in the current Labour Shadow Cabinet. And he is, amongst other things, particularly interested in the concept, or not concept, the reality of legal aid and the way in which that has been reduced in recent years. So that may well come into some of the things we want to say. I'm going to start by asking all of our panel to say a few words on the question of whether or not it is true that the politics that we're now in do seem to value radical, transformational, socialist change over a purely economistic idea of growth. Vince Cable, what do you think?
Well, I don't think that's what people are reaching for, but there certainly is a big change from what I always identified as conventional politics in the UK and elsewhere. And I thought the conventional view, I thought was captured in Gordon Brown's budgets, if you remember, 10, 12 years ago. And he would announce, we've just had the 58th month of uninterrupted growth. And everybody would cheer, and the public would approve. And that was the metric by which a government was judged, and seemingly correctly, and indeed rewarded politically. And there were parallels in the United States with Clinton's argument with the Bushes, Germany, Gerhard Schröder, then Merkel. It was all about competence. And something has now drastically changed. And the question is, has it changed because people have discovered other values? I think probably not, although it appears so. Religion, culture, these issues have become more dominant? Or is it that people have reacted to economic failure by looking at other things? And I think it is the latter. And the crucial event was 2008, the collapse of the banking system, a fall in our economy of, I think, 5%. Something it never happened before since the Second World War. Had a massive impact on people's living standards, on the ability of government to deliver services. It happened here, it happened across the continent, in the United States and in many other places. And I think partly out of anger and frustration, after a time lag, you've had other kinds of politics coming up. And in the United States, it's been a combination of religious fundamentalism and the kind of nativist politics that Trump has so successfully exploited. Here it's Brexit. In Germany, it's sort of anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, same in France. So we're getting these new strains of politics coming in, but I think it is a reaction to perceived economic failure. And I think we will see the proof of this in the next few years, because if Trump fails to deliver, people's living standards don't improve in the United States, if the wages of American workers continue to stagnate or fall, I suspect they will turn against him. And the test of populism will be whether it does meet people's expectations about living standards. Now, that you could say that's a sort of crudely economic view, and clearly other values do matter, and I'd like them to matter. But I don't think we should get carried away. I'll just take two examples. I mean, I would like to feel that our politics is becoming a bit greener. We're becoming a bit more environmentally aware, climate emergencies, all those things. But we've had a couple of salutary warnings in the last few months about what happens if politicians get too carried away. Macron's carbon tax resulted in the Yellow Vest protest, in part. The Australian Labour Party was widely tipped to win the general election, failed to do so, at least in part as a reaction against what were undoubtedly progressive green politics. And so although we've got to, as somebody who's on the centre-left, I would describe myself as, we've got to be alert to issues around inequality, environment, and so on. I think we shouldn't get too far ahead of public opinion, where the new politics is partly a reflection of the anger that people have felt because of economic failure.
Vince, thank you very much for setting out those thoughts. And can I turn straight to you, Richard Burgon, obviously sitting in the shadow cabinet. Do you think it's fair to say that a new, more radical politics on the left, which many would argue Corbyn's shadow cabinet encompasses, is one that has downplayed economics in terms of much more social radicalism?
Well, I think that in the Labour Party, since Jeremy Corbyn became elected, he's made a central plank, along with the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, central plank of his politics, a clear anti-austerity politics. Actually, Jeremy became leader of the Labour Party on the basis that Labour members and supporters and affiliated trade unions wanted a very hard, very clear opposition to austerity. So in opposition to austerity, a politics for, yes, economic growth, but shared out more equally, was at the very centre of his prospectus. And so therefore it's not the case, in my view, that Jeremy or Labour have downplayed the economic aspect. But in terms of the title of this debate and discussion today, I do think it's a bit of a false choice to pose social change against economic growth. Whatever label members of the public put on it, I think most people actually want both. They want social change, in other words, a better society, and they also want economic growth, or to be more particular, rather economic change. There's a lot of economic injustice in our society, and that of course affects people's levels of stress, it affects people's enjoyment of their work and their day-to-day lives, it affects people's relationship, it affects people's health as well, as so many studies show. But I think what people aren't pursuing is really growth for growth's sake. And a book that I finally need to get round to reading in the recess, amongst many others, is the book about donut economics, she calls it, by Kate Raworth. And I think she puts it very interestingly in there. Kate says that humanity's 21st century challenge is to meet the needs of all within the means of the planet. And when you look at the diagram that she drew up, it really does make sense, doesn't it? If people don't have enough, and that includes, by the way, a political voice, housing, health and education and the rest of it, they fall inside the hole. But if the economy grows for the sake of growth in of itself and isn't checked or regulated or looked at, then you spill over into damaging that which we depend upon, all of us and humanity and the other species and the globe, which is our environment. So people want richer lives. That's intrinsically linked to the economy. And I don't think we can use the term economy in a neutral sense. When we talk about economic growth, we've got to ask ourselves the question of ownership and distribution. What do we mean by the economy? And when growth takes place, who enjoys the fruits of that growth? Because in recent decades, due to untrammelled neoliberal economics, more and more of the benefits of that growth have gone to the very richest people, both in our country, but also globally as well. So people do want richer lives, which is why we need to start looking at trying to reduce the amount of time that people's day-to-day work or the working week takes up. The proliferation of zero-hours contracts. But it's right across the economic spectrum, actually. Even those who are relatively well off have their own stresses when it comes to living standards, when it comes to social welfare. And I just want to end on this, really. The Green New Deal, as proposed by AOC in the United States and also by Rebecca Long Bailey in the Labour Party here, is an important part of this debate. But I suppose I'll finish really with this quote, which I think is very helpful to understanding this debate and the way I think it's formed. That's by the respected economist from Latin American, former Ecuadorian president, Rafael Correa, who said the great challenge facing humanity in the 21st century is to achieve the supremacy of human beings over capital, with societies dominating markets, not markets dominating societies.